by March 31st, April 1st of every year. But the review process doesn't begin really until the legislature goes back into session after the first of the year. That's when the hearings are held. So we could include something in our annual report that, again, would serve perhaps as a means of planting a seed, as a means of
Bob, I think Franklin was not suggesting putting it in the report, but having a letter that goes on top of it to the people it is going to, making the case about the economic situation of the committee and how many years we've gone without a budget increase, and sort of laying the groundwork, saying that we intend to come back, but not actually put it in the report, but make a letter that goes on top of the report that goes to everybody who gets it.
I think that's a great idea. We wait until after the first of the year to transmit the report to the legislators, because this year there will be quite a few new ones, and a cover letter of introduction along the lines of what you suggested, it seems to me would be exceedingly helpful.
From the chair of the committee.
From the chair.
Right.
From
the chair.
Should we
chair of the committee, but I'm not the chair. Who is the chair of our committee?
We don't have a chair.
Should we put on the agenda for the next meeting election of chair?
I think we should, and I also think we should try to have a draft of the letter with some of these things pulled together.
Got it. I don't know that I want to be chair of the committee, but I don't mind leading the effort.
We'll do it.
And using what I have, I just...
Oh, you'd be a great chair.
Yeah, you would.
I have a question just
before
before we get really down the road here. Just on the information, I'm just not sure. Are we talking about needs of the Committee on Open Government that aren't being fulfilled because of a lack of budget? Or are we talking about wants?
Good question.
And, can we get information on what you feel, replacement of secretary, and also, and maybe this is for a discussion in between meetings, but I'm just not well versed on exactly how the process works with internal discussions within the agency in which the committee's embedded versus offline and going out. So before we rocket down the road of electing a chair to go out and do a lot of liaison work, I'm just not sure what discussions have taken place, what other methods there are.
Camille and I have made the case. Jim. Camille and I have made the case for years that for the committee to function effectively, we need more staff. We need more staff. We have no support staff at all. Again, I thank Wendy who fills in when we need her. But we have no support staff. Certainly, and realistically too, I'm not going to be around forever. We need.
He's retired.
Yeah. Been retired for 3 years.
That's a story which I'll tell you at another time. But we need to guarantee continuity if we possibly can. And Camille is great; she knows the law cold. But if and when I leave, and I'm not going to suggest to you that I have any inclination to do so at the moment, but it's inevitable. It's inevitable, and one person just can't do it on his or her own. We need more, and certainly we'd like to have the capacity to spread the knowledge so that the public and government can be served well in the future. And so
we
far,
need a plan.
So far, in all honesty, our requests, which have gone through the Department of State, have gone to the Division of Budget, have fallen on deaf ears. And if we can again get some legislators to become interested, maybe that would help.
Jim's approach dovetails with what you just said, and it does approach the whole question of the long-term viability of freedom of information in the state, which I think have 3 specific issues. You mentioned one, which is the fact that you're not immortal, in spite of the fact that some of us may wonder.
Yes.
Right. That you are not immortal, and there needs to be something that assures a path of succession, and in fact that path will be taken. The second thing has to do with the funding, the allocation of it. How do you assure that one agency doesn't have the ability to throttle the organization into becoming a non-entity? And we can consider different paths. In other words, you could say a budget will be proposed by the executive and by the legislature, and the largest one of the two will be accepted for that year. so that there ends up a way to assure that there happens to be some funding for this. The third is the justification. Third point is the justification of the agency itself. And look, I was a history and a political science major, and I just realized how stupid I am, in the sense that a political theorist says you realize that Franklin Roosevelt and Joseph Stalin both believed in democracy, and that's why they could talk with each other. It's just that they had a different view of what democracy was and its purpose. One was to have an informed electorate, and the other was to control it. And one of the things that we have to be clear about is that in the democracy there is the risk of power becoming more significant than the people. And part of we are an insurance policy for the people. And we really do need to talk in terms of political theory.
Well, I think that that's true, and it goes back, I think, to Dave's point. What is our reason for existence? Have we proven that we have value?
Good point.
And I don't know that we could ever answer the question, what would life be like if there were no Committee on Open Government or no Freedom of Information law? And that question has actually come up.
Two different questions.
Two different
Well,
questions.
they are two different questions, but there have been a couple of occasions recently where reporters have said, I don't know what we did before there was a Freedom of Information law as an industry. How did we get what we need to share with the public? And I think it's an unanswerable question, but I think that in and of itself demonstrates that Freedom of Information and Open Meetings law have value.
No one's questioning that.
Yeah, that is
That's really a different question. I don't think we need to focus on that because no one's questioning that. The question is, how do we fund the Committee on Open Government, and why do we need
fund
that?
the Committee on Open
Well,
Government?
and your presentations are fabulous, and that's something to point to too. I just think we need the tools in terms of what you answering sort of both those questions. What do you do, and what would happen if we continue on this course of sort of defunding the committee, and then a plan. Because I'll tell you, Albany is a total mystery to me. So it's with all due respect to you guys, somebody who knows something about how to get things done there needs to help us shape a plan.
Clearly,
a strategy.
This has to be separate from our report, but our report can certainly say that we are interested and will pursue in the coming year these limited issues, because I think that we need to let them know this is what matters. The long-term viability of this for civil government is important.
And I think Dave's notion of the cover letter is fabulous, and we can make those points. Good.
Thank you. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Now the result of those problems.
Yes, we solved the. Let's move on. Yes.
I think that's great. Just looking at some of this stuff too, and maybe between now and the next meeting or generating a cover letter, just the point that was made about how other state agency budgets have also, just a comparison of how our budget for open government versus state agency budgets have gone on. I mean, I know some of the reductions here were in staff in 2007 and on, when we've had different freezes and things like that. I'm just not well versed in how that's looked, so maybe that can be just numbers to look into as far as comparative.
Camille did
data.
some of that yesterday, and I'm not going to go into the numbers, but in comparison, again, the expenditures, if you will, associated with the Committee on Open Government are minuscule in comparison with expenditures of, let's call them, somewhat similar agencies. Camille pointed out one, the Lake George Park Commission. Everybody knows about that, right? Its budget was almost $2 million, 10 times the size of ours. The Tug Hill Commission, not far from Steve Waters' home, its budget was over $1 million. And I'm not suggesting that they don't perform worthwhile functions, but I think that we do too.
Most of it for snow shoveling.
Well,
I think it's certainly, you guys have performed phenomenal functions,
Well-
and I think the continuity aspects are definitely things to address.
we've performed things at the behest of the other. In other words, we are serving the executive, we're serving the legislature. We really are, in fact, very successful in service to the other sections of government.
Well, the truth is we serve everybody. You know,
Yes.
I've said this before, the most important thing that we do, in my opinion, is pick up the phone and answer the email quickly. If we can answer questions, thereby solving problems before they become disputes, encourage compliance with law instantly, that's the best thing that we can do. That's the best thing that we can do. And you know this, and I've said this in public so many times. We get well over 1,000 calls from the news media every year, and sometimes reporters call knowing the answer. But they can't print their own opinions, they call for the quote. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes that's enough to encourage compliance. So it's a function that is in so many ways unique to state government. And that's something else that I think we should point out.
I'd just like to ask, I mean, is there a process here? Are there budget hearings when you submit your budget annually? And is that not the point where you then make a justification or a case for? And I'm not sure what you're looking for either. I don't know, how does not expanding the office hurt New Yorkers? I mean, we all know what a great job that you do here, but I mean, if for the future case, for what you're heading for, how does this hurt New Yorkers? What's the case that you're going to put on the table to increase the budget? I don't know. I'm like Franklin. I don't know how it works here in Albany, but are there hearings on your budget when you get?
There are no hearings on our budget. We've always been subsumed as part of the executive office within the Department of State. So there's no budget line that has ever identified the Committee on Open Government.
So you have
because
no
we've always been tiny. We've always been tiny. Never have there been more than 4 employees. So it's not a topic that has received any real or significant attention. And that's what we want to do.
So it's really finding out that route.
I would think Cuomo would be very interested.
Should we move on to the draft? Yes?
Sure.
Okay. Thoughts and comments?
I had just some kind of grammar type things on the revised introduction, which I'll just give to Camille. But the one
Okay.
substantive thing, I wasn't in the meeting last time, so I guess you can probably discuss this whole proposal towards the back about making fees mandatory. If
We did
if-
not. We didn't discuss it. That's
No.
actually a
From
suggestion that came out of the FOIL at 40 conference. That one of the panelists was adamant that the committee should have the power to order disclosure, and we should just follow all these advisory opinions. And Bob and I kind of startled a little bit there, but offer it as a conversation point here.
I see. I mean, it's an interesting concept. The courts are so terrible about awarding fees in the sense of they don't like to do it. They think the state agencies are, undersourced and overtaxed, and even when they delay, they don't like to award fees. So to me, it's unlikely to accomplish much. But I'm not opposed to putting it in. I thought this had already been discussed. I do think that the way it's set up, it's not written in a way that made sense. When I first read it, I thought, this doesn't work at all. But I think it's just, at least as I understand the concept, 1 and 2 are kind of or, and then 3 and 4 are or, but they're and for both of them. And the way it's written, it looks like 1 is a standalone thing. Anyway, in other words, you're not contemplating that just the fact if we prepared an advisory opinion on the relevant facts that we automatically get fees. And it sounds like that's a standalone or, but I would, the bottom line is just grammatically, I would combine 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and just have two things. That you need 1 and 2, 1 or 2 and 3 or 4.
And shouldn't it be in the body of the report, not in the introduction? I mean,
Yeah,
it's a proposal.
that's the other thing. There is a section in the report on fees where we make a different proposal, and it seemed to me that it should be combined with that as a second proposal.
Yeah, that was my thought.
Rather
Well,
than, and I would,
the other proposal is something that we've offered for the past several years, and
yeah.
they sort of go together, but I think that this would be something of a palliative that this might be more acceptable, I would hope so, than the recommendation that if you go to court and you win and either of those two conditions is met, the ones that appear in the law now, that it's an automatic award. It seems less likely that would be approved than something like this, where somebody has gone to the committee and gotten an opinion, and the agency still said, "Nah, the heck with you, we're going to say no."
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just think that even if you want to leave some of it up front because it's a new thought, it should be repeated back under C.
Yeah.
So it's there in one spot, and it should be, in a box with a recommendation, and but under that same heading about fees.
I have some real concerns with the whole concept. I mean, if you had a state agency that was relying on a court decision,
Yep.
and then you had the petitioner relying on your decision,
Yep.
and the petitioner ends up winning, then they get fees, right, automatically. You're making your opinions superior to court decisions.
Well, there are a lot.
Doesn't seem right.
Ask Dave whether our opinion should be superior to court decisions. I think that that in so many instances that is absolutely appropriate. But that's just
Right now, it's not even legally binding.
That's just my belief. No, you're right.
And there's a court of appeals decision that says state agencies' opinions are equal to the commission's. I mean,
Well, there are
I
other
don't know.
decisions. There are other decisions that have suggested that unless our opinions are unreasonable, they should be withheld. And my response to that is, if they want to believe it, that's great. This would give the committee, I think, something in addition in terms of its capacity. I don't want to say its authority, but its capacity to be influential and to encourage compliance with law.
What would
Kind
be
of a
more
backdoor way of making the opinion legal binding.
What would be a more functional way of trying to help the process along?
I think the current proposal that's in there is acceptable. I mean, we all agreed on that last year.
Except it's not going anywhere.
I think this will have less chance of going anywhere. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Besides the fact that I'm concerned just putting the committee's opinions above court decisions. I mean, nobody's going to like that.
I agree with the thought that our prior recommendation actually is the way we should be going, but we seem to be going nowhere. I mean, in talking about this whole issue, just from the standpoint of someone who litigates these things, I think the problem more often than the fact that an agency ignores its rights or acts unreasonably in terms of interpreting things is they just never respond. And 7 years ago now, the legislature amended the law to make fees awardable just for delay, where it didn't used to be there, and courts still don't do it. But the biggest reason that FOIA doesn't work now is it takes forever to get anything. You can't get a response. When you finally get a response, it's half-hearted. If you go to court, it takes another long time, and people just give up. And if we can't develop some mechanisms to incentivize agencies to respond and ensure that they have the resources to respond, which is another whole separate issue, it's just things are getting worse and worse.
I think that that's true in some situations, but not everywhere. I think if you look at state government and New York City government, you have monstrous agencies, and they are the, if you want to characterize them as guilty parties, that's fine. They're the ones who engage in the most significant delays. But once you get out of state government and New York City, the experience in so many instances is different. It's different. You don't face the same kinds of delays. And I've suggested so many times that my belief generally is that as the unit of government gets smaller, there's better accountability because there's much more direct interaction between the government officials and the public than there is in either the city or state government.
That's a fair point, Bob, and I don't deal with a lot of those, but you're right, and it probably has a huge impact more at the local level, the county level. And even there's a lot of state agencies that are really, really good. I've had some experience this year dealing with the Parks Department and some others, and they meet deadlines, they get back to you, they're very efficient, and then there's just some agencies that think this is a waste of time. So
I agree, and one of the big questions at this FOIL at 40 day was, what can we do to make FOIL better? This was the suggestion that kind of bubbled up to the top, but there are agencies who are stellar at responding to requests and being more than responsible in meeting those deadlines. And we know who they are because those are the records access officers who actually call our office and say, wait, what should I be doing here? How should I work this through? And if there were a way that we could help those other agencies get on the ball here, that's what we're looking for.
Well, that's a
what we're
bit of
looking for.
self-promotion that you can include in a budget request, is to point to where you are helping agencies resolve it and say we could do more outreach and more. I mean, that's something we could be doing
Some
more.
states do mediation. Some states have mediation programs. Some states have attorney general orders who, if you want to challenge an attorney general's order to disclose a particular record, you have to bring it with the challenge within 15 days. Or, some states have these other types of mechanisms whereby you can do either an appeal to the court or you can do an appeal to the Iowa Review Board that has order authority. And if you fail to comply with an order of the Iowa Review Board, then you're subject to sanctions and penalties and fines. Actually, they have fines for individual members. These are examples. I'm not suggesting we're going there because I think those are really out of the question, but I do think there are things that we could be proposing here that would help get those agencies
what
on.
about, Bob, I'm trying to remember now, but many years ago, this may be a repeat recommendation, but what Camille's comments are suggesting is, one thing that might be more effective than trying to figure out other ways to impose fees on agencies is to propose amending the attorney's fee provision that says when an agency is sanctioned or fees are awarded because they've unreasonably delayed or, whatever the other standard is, not followed the law, that a court should require the records officer to go through some kind of training program at the Committee on Open Government as a sanction.
Ooh.
Well, there is a provision like that in the open meetings law, where a court has the authority to require that a public body take training given by the Committee on Open Government.
So I think we'd be more likely to get that because it doesn't require an outlay of money, which the courts are always reluctant to require agencies to
And
do.
it makes us more important.
It
Gives
may-
us
yeah,
another
reason why we need
But
more
why
money.
you think there's no chance of mediation? You think there's no chance that we could get a mediation with or without fees, setting that aside? But is that not something we could recommend?
I think that it's an interesting idea, and we probably should pursue it. I would be reluctant to kind of just throw it in this report without thinking through how that would work. What kind of staff do you need?
Right.
What would be the
involves all that
mechanics?
structure.
How does that fit in with the CPLR and other? We'd have to think that all through. And it's a bigger issue.
If you're saying that some agencies perform very well and some do not, rather than bring the courts in, the courts are only the example that they are not. It really is an executive, a higher level executive that needs to deal with his or her agency. It's not the court really that you're asking to improve the agency. It's saying, excuse me, Governor, but your departments work so very well in A, B, and C agencies, but not in D and E. How would we engage the executive to look at a record to say, these work well and these don't? What could we do to improve them?
What if we developed a method of quantifying the good agencies and the bad agencies and issued a report card every year to put public pressure on agencies that are not compliant?
How do you do that? How do you do that?
There's got to be a way to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
we just need a little creative thinking.
We need some
we could
creative
we could measure the number of cases that are brought somehow. I mean, there's, I have to believe there's ways to do that. And I mean, I like the comment that was just made, is we need to get the executive branch to be doing its job. And one way you do that is publicity and public pressure. It's a great idea.
Well, to do what you suggest, to do a report card, we'd have to have many more staff to track what agencies are doing, to get agencies to report to us. It would be, I'm not suggesting that it's not a good idea, but I just think that it's a pretty significant task.
But I think if we could come up with a methodology and decided we really want to do it, my guess is it would take some time and effort, but we could probably get some interns or volunteers, work with some law schools to do something. I mean, there's ways we could do it on an initial basis to see if it works. and then figure out if it was worth the effort. I think that Bill de Blasio, when he was the
He did.
he did a report on city commission, the city, and we should look at his methodology. But he actually gave a report card and graded them A to F.
I think that is doable when it comes to, again, New York City government, New York State government, because the number of government agencies is somewhat limited. It's somewhat limited. But there are 10,000 additional units of government in the state, which are fairly important. And again, my belief is that local governments are more significant in the lives of most people than state agencies in terms of their day-to-day lives. How far do we go? How far would we go with that kind of effort? I don't know what the answer is. I like the idea of training. Maybe there should be mandatory training for records access officers in state and city agencies. But for local government, again, there are thousands. And again, I guess it comes down to our capacity with 2 people for the time being to carry out this kind of function. We just need a lot more. And from there, the question is whether the executive, the budget, the division of the budget, the state legislature believe that it's important enough to spend the money. You know, we do CLE programs. I did a CLE program at the request of the Attorney General's office just, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, and there are hundreds of state agency attorneys who participate. Whether anything sinks in, that's another question. I don't know what the answer is, but we do a lot of training.
Well, if you're going to include a provision in the report to do the report card function, you could also put in the necessary appropriation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's appropriate, different from, just asking for your budget to be supplemented in general.
I'm unsure of the Attorney General's responsibility as might be considered in this.
Now? None.
No, but I'm wondering if it's within the purview of the Attorney General to assure the effective operation of the executive agencies regarding FOI.
My neighborhood had
No.
the worst response from the Attorney General's office.
The Attorney General has to defend all the Article 78 claims when people don't comply with it.
I've suggested, there are states where the AG has the ability to offer opinions regarding freedom of information, open meetings, sometimes issue binding decisions. I've always thought that was ridiculous for the reason that you just mentioned. How do you issue an opinion and represent an agency that disagrees with it at the same time? I don't know how you can do that. And the other point is, we've disagreed with the Attorney General on several occasions. Bill brought up, which entity
I retract the suggestion.
should have more clout or authority. This is the office that's been given the statutory responsibility to offer advice concerning FOIL and the Open Meetings Law, not the Attorney General. And there are times when we believe strongly that the AG's position has been wrong on the law, and we've expressed that publicly. Maybe they don't like it, but c'est la vie, that's our function. That's our role.
And as you know, the Attorney General's office is not very good at complying with FOIL.
Yes, we know. Yes, we do know that. How do we get the executive branch to recognize it's very difficult?
So, Bob, why don't you and I put our heads together about maybe something that Center for Technology and Government would be interested in working on us with, or perhaps there's a clinic over at the law school, maybe there's a clinic at another law school that might be interested in taking on a report card type project.
Maybe the Empire
maybe
Center
we could
would help you with it.
The Empire Center, right? Maybe we could talk with, we could include 1 or 2 of the members on the committee who are most interested in developing that kind of idea as we go, and then see how far we get.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay.
So is the paragraph in or out?
Any paragraphs.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I see a big.
Good question.
Yeah, is there sufficient enough support for this new food for thought proposal to be included?
I personally, I wouldn't oppose it if there's a lot of support for it. I actually think if we're going to make a new proposal, a better way to go would be to ask them to make the Freedom of Information law parallel to the open meetings law and create a new sanction requiring training to agencies that are found to unreasonably delay or to violate without justification a disclosure obligation.
But again, you have to go to court before you get that kind of an order.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's a sanction that would be helpful because then now you have some teeth in going after agencies that are serial offenders, and there are some. And it's something that a court is more likely to do, and something the legislature would be more likely to do because it doesn't require significant expenditures of new money.
I've always wondered about the training that is required, that a court can require under open meetings law, that Bob a couple times now has gone out to various school districts for this mandated training, and one school district in particular keeps coming back. There are still issues with this school district, which makes me wonder, have you ever run into statutory authority to continue to monitor behavior? I mean, compliance with an order is one thing, but is there a, if you send somebody to training and then you say, okay, and now for the next 6 months after you get that training, I want you to report back? Or have some kind of authority?
You could draft a law that would say, that the court could require training and obligate the committee to file a report with the court on the success of the training or something. I mean, you could think about how you draft something like that.
Yeah, you could be
and Bob, to your point
required.
about you have to go to court, I don't want to, let's not mix apples and oranges. You're thinking about, what we're talking about now are sanctions that can only be awarded in court. That's what the proposal is. And I just think that this is a better proposal. The other stuff about what we might do proactively, I think we should just keep separate. That's a different issue.
All right. So then,
Along with the training, you could mandate the entity to have to copy you on every one
a
of your decisions.
reporting requirement on the part of the entity. That would be doable, it seems to me. So it sounds as though the consensus is that this new proposal is not necessarily positive, and that maybe the effort to require some sort of training as a sanction would be more appropriate. Is that the consensus?
Yes.
I would go with that.
I would agree with that.
Great.
And I would do, in structuring the next draft, I would do what you did here, is I'd have a little reference to this new sanction in the introduction, and under your C, awarding, I would call it awarding, sanctions under FOIL or something, and put it with the attorney's fee provision as an alternative sanction.
Okay.
In the same part of the report, where you spell it out.
Okay. Good. So we've gotten over a pretty big hurdle here, at least for the moment.
I have a recommendation that I think we made last year, and were successful. I think the first paragraph ought to be really tooting the progress that's been made in the last year and years for Freedom of Information Act, and tooting our own horn and tooting the horn of others that have been responsible. And what I wrote was push plus email plus law changes, that being 95, Port Authority, and pension. And I just think that the push plus the email plus the changes in law have been huge. And we ought to put that up in our first paragraph, and then our introduction should flow with those three kinds of things, which your introduction sort of does. But you shouldn't have to read all the way down. I just think you need an introductory paragraph or two that really lays out the huge progress that's been made, because it is huge. It's unbelievable. Even since we sat here a year ago, there's so much more push, and the ability to file by email is huge. And at least these three legal changes are significant. And then get to, but there's still problems, and here are the problems, which then justifies our need for more budget. And I'm happy to work on writing a sentence or two, but I think a couple more sentences up front.
Franklin, if you're volunteering Send them to
Great.
us.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
get
you.
to-
I had a stylistic thing and then a substantive question. One is stylistic. I think when we go through our proposals, once you're into the legislative proposals, we should make them in a uniform style. In some of them, we have recommendations in bold and in a box, and in some we don't. I think we should have one for each recommendation if it is one, and we should put them in the same spot. Sometimes they're at the beginning, sometimes they're at the end. I think it should be something that just kind of looks like a uniform presentation.
I agree. And in that vein, Dave,
The first one that
first
has no-
one doesn't have a box.
Right.
And that was one of my questions. Do we want a boxed recommendation for the law enforcement?
I would support one, and I think it should say something like the recommendation is repeal or replace Section 50A or maybe just repeal and not even get into it.
I thought the discussion at last meeting was that we were gonna push it back a little, and go anywhere when we led with it last year.
Well, we scaled it. I scaled it back.
Yeah, scaled it back and pushed it back. That's what I recall.
Well, when
Is
we,
this really our most important thing after the stuff we're including in the handbook?
I haven't. I'm
I know you like this.
I'm probably irrational about this, but I think 50A is one of the worst statutes ever enacted.
What you're really talking about is you want a restatement, you would like to have a restatement of the original intent.
What I would like to do is see a repeal of 50A because it makes no sense at all.
Yeah, but we know that that's not going to happen.
It seems that it's not going to happen.
So how do you become effective, assuming that's not going to happen? What's the side door?
What's the side door, Dave? I mean, you've made the argument so many times.
I think that that the other way would be to get the legislature to restrict its scope to the, as it was said, to the original intent to cover only files maintained and created and maintained for the specific purpose of personnel decisions or something. I mean, we'd have to come up with some language. The problem is what we've seen has happened in court. If you say that what the courts have said is that the current language includes anything that might be used to make a decision to retain or fire someone, and that means anything that they do obviously affects whether they could be retained or fired. So anything that they do it can be withheld, and it's an unworkable situation.
I have a thought. You look at the statute and it says that personnel records that are used to evaluate performance toward continued employment or promotion are confidential. One of the difficulties, and this has come up so many times and I don't know why I didn't think of it before, maybe for purposes of 50A, we can come up with a definition of what constitutes a personnel record. Certainly, it's not the gun tag that was the subject of a Court of Appeals decision. It's probably not the incident report, which happens to name a police officer. It's something which typically would be in a personnel file. The evaluation, the review, something like that. And then, again, the next clause is used to evaluate performance toward continued employment or promotion. We had an awful decision this year, at least in my opinion, by the third department, where the court said, well, that even includes records that relate to so-and-so's performance after that person is no longer employed.
Retired. Is retired, right.
It makes no sense. So maybe those kinds of terms of limitation could serve as amendments to 58, as you suggest, to go back to its original intent.
We are obliged to separate health records in our business, health records from personnel records. It may be a suggestion to also separate from personal records those things that are incident reports in a second file.
Well, again, those things that are evaluative in nature, it seems to me, regarding performance, as opposed to other items which are ancillary.
I think if you want to go down this road, if you look at the early Court of Appeals decisions construing 50A, going back 15 years or more, that the court kind of went down that line, and there's some language in there that might be useful.
Yeah.
And I'm forgetting the name of the case, but there was a case in the mid-'80s where they kind of went off the tracks, or the early '90s.
There are two of them. There's Prisoners Legal Services, which involved unsubstantiated allegations of misconduct on the part of correction officers, and there was the infamous egg-throwing decision out of Schenectady.
No, but I'm saying there's earlier decisions where the court was construing 50A in the way we would agree it should be construed, and we could track the language from those if you're trying to find a definition, is all I'm suggesting. It's just trying to point you in the... And the other thing I would say, if you're going to go this way and we're going to come up with a definition, I would urge you or Camille to kind of draft something and then run it, maybe show it to some of the lawyers who've litigated in the Court of Appeals, like John Dinellen has had 2 or 3 of these cases and has been through the whole history of that.
Sure.
And they could kind of help you refine it in a way that would make it effective.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
That's
So
a good plan, since we're not making any progress.
I did pull some language out of that Daily Gazette case because we had talked about it after the last meeting had ended, and there is some strong language in that Daily Gazette case about...
What's the year for that?
That's 1990.
Yeah.
It was...
That would be one of about
There was some
what
good language
constitutes a
in there.
personnel record.
Well, they didn't list records that the agency must demonstrate a substantial and realistic potential of the requested material for the abusive use against the officer or the firefighter.
In a litigation.
That's a much
Yeah.
higher standard. And then tailored redactions to preclude use in personal attacks against an officer would largely fulfill the agency's important function of dissemination of matters of legitimate public interest without sacrificing the values. In that case, though, the court then ordered all the records closed. I mean, it was great language, but it was applied.
They didn't follow it, right?
But I would encourage you to go down that road and then we can tweak the legislative proposal A and have a specific proposal about that. I would urge either to say repeal 50A or insert a definition to restrict the scope of personnel records to their original intended purpose.
Right, to clarify the scope of the exception.
And then maybe give them a proposed definition.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah,
Thank
I like
you.
that.
In a box.
It's just a stylistic issue we've just been talking half an hour about.
So we're thinking within the box as opposed to, never mind.
Yeah, no, I think
Yeah.
we're thinking exactly. There we go. I didn't have anything else.
Yeah,
It's just some grammatical things for you.
Thank
to
you.
and I have a
Okay.
few too, but I'll give those to you.
Okay.
And
Two sentences.
this is a lesson from my wife. Here I've been writing editorials for 40 years, and she says, "Damn it, you're not writing a story here. Put your conclusion up front, and
was
then
my
let
point.
the people
Yeah.
read your proof of it." So putting the box up front is, I think, because it helps people understand what the hell they're reading about.
Exactly. I think that's right.
Good. So it looks as though Camille and I have our work cut out for ourselves.
When is the next meeting? Do we have that date?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we
Friday
do.
the 11th or something like that.
It's Thursday, the 11th, I believe, of December. So we have a month. We have a month, and certainly we'd encourage your contributions.
Will you be able to circulate the draft
Yes.
several days ahead so we have
Yes,
time to?
we will have to do that. We will have to.
That's fine. Yeah, so you have room for
Yeah.
1 and 2.
Yeah, we'll do that. This year we were a little bit behind.
Got jammed up.
We were jammed up.
Just get your staff
Yeah.
working on it now.
Where are they again? Where are those people?
Huh. The minions.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was pretty cruel, Dave. Rubbing it in.
Just trying to make a point.
What else have we got? We'll have also by then, we should have our usual statistics. And in so many respects, it seems to me that you look at the statistics and they may appear to be down in some ways, but part of that, and in a way, Franklin alluded to it, we do so much now via email, and it's all day. It's not all day, but it's so many days when we can avoid. We have statistics regarding phone calls. We can avoid the phone call. We can avoid the issuance of a written opinion via a 2-sentence response in email, and it resolves a lot of problems. So some of the statistics may appear to be lower, but in actuality, we're not less busy.
Do you keep stats of hits on your website?
We don't have we used to be able to keep stats on hits on our website. The Department of State doesn't provide that service anymore. We used to have an actual breakdown of where people looked, which opinions they were looking up. But I don't know that the department has the ability to do that now. It used to. It used to when we were flush. But it's kind of amazing. The website has become hugely popular. You give a presentation these days. There are 100 people in the crowd, and I've always asked, how many of you have visited our website? And it used to be that 3 hands would go up. Now it's only 3 hands that don't go up. And then I made a point too at this 40th anniversary thing, and we've made it in the past. In New York, and this is not true in every jurisdiction, FOIL is simply a word that everybody knows. They might not know what it means, but it's part of the consciousness of literally hundreds of thousands of people in this state. They know that there is some sort of a provision that gives people the right to gain access to government information. And I think that's really kind of a critical legacy of this committee. It's even an adjective now. I mentioned it the other day. People ask, is this foilable? Is it foilable?
Are we fully staffed with members? Are we at our capacity for members?
Yep,
or do we
we
have
are.
vacancies?
No, we're fully staffed. 2 of our members in Buffalo were prohibited from going into the office today for obvious reasons.
Poor thing.
But we are at our full complement, which is great.
Amy did apologize for late notice that she wasn't going to make the meeting today.
And Colleen emailed that she had a last-minute client meeting and couldn't come.
Well, I'm glad that both of you were able to make it. You both offer fabulous contributions all the time, and in a lot of ways, I mean, Camille and I are in our, I don't want to call it an ivory tower, but it's great to have more heads. It's great to have more heads.
I was going to say it.
Yes, it is incredibly
Yes, it is.
valuable.
Yes, it
Come
is.
up out of our tunnels there.
So,
Okay?
do we have any more comments regarding what we have to do in the next couple of weeks?
I think I would just like to add to compliment to you and Camille, and your website and the resources that you've been putting out are fantastic. I think that the use of multiple forms of media, having advisory opinions, but also having clips of presentations that people can access in a very digestible way for 2-minute clip of a discussion of a concept under FOIL is very helpful. I think in here there's a lot of great things. I thought that the emphasis on proactive disclosure and the things you noted about Open Data New York, that's fantastic. Being newer as a designee sitting on the committee, looking around at just what's out there for proactive disclosure now versus a few years ago. It's staggering, and it's really great, and you're to be commended for your efforts. And also, since you see as you said, in ivory tower, but you're very accessible and both of you are out all the time training. And I know working in an agency, I work with people every day who strive really to get FOIL right. and who I know rely on that website very heavily, look to it a lot, as well as other court decisions. But from an agency perspective, I see people every day really trying to get this right and to strike the fair balance that FOIL calls for. And you've been invaluable in supporting that. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Jim, we have to pass on some of those kudos to Wendy York-Briggs right here in the Albany room, and also to Erin O'Brien, who works for Division of Administrative Rules at Department of State. She actually works down the corridor from me, and she's been great about getting those opinions into a shape that they can actually be posted online. We've been really working hard on that lately, and she's been invaluable in that. So thank you, Jim. I appreciate those comments.
Yeah, and searchable. Your search function is great. It works very well. It's very helpful.
And again, that has been based upon the support that's been given to us by the Department of State. I think that's a huge advantage, having a searchable website. You can't find it on the alphabetical index. You just type in the word or phrase that pops into your head. That too connects you with the opinions, and people love that. People love it.
I think the cover letter we've been talking about can include that you've sort of depended on the kindness of not strangers but others to just get your work done even now. That's not as it should be either.
Well,
but it shows that you've exhausted that. You've been doing that, but that's not entirely right.
Well, it does. You can be very clear that, at least from my point of view, we're proud to be part of the Department of State.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That simple a statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, Stephen. Thank you.
And thank you for sending Camille down today.
Partay.
Great. Partay. Well, not quite. But.
She would have been peeved, in consideration of her sister's presentation tonight if she hadn't gone down, right?
No, I didn't even have it on the calendar because I knew I couldn't make a Thursday night performance. And so I actually called one of my other sisters last night and said, hey, do you want to go down to the city because I'm going down for the day? And she said, oh, you can see Sarah's performance. So it all just came about. Yeah, worked out really nicely.
Good.
On that note, thank you. I appreciate all your time here, folks.
Thank everybody. Have a great time tonight.
Here, here.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Best to